Hi there, gallery members and new viewers alike. Thanks for tuning in for this latest edition of Gridiron Gallery. If you haven't seen my channel before up until this point with new videos, recommend you like this one and subscribe for more. We got plenty of content on all your favorite football leagues. And for those gallery members out there, thank you as always for tuning in. Really can't appreciate you enough. Now, on to the show. Join me today on the Gridiron Gallery podcast. I have the pleasure of being joined by special guest, former Saskatchewan Roughriders play-by-play and host of his own show on Game Plus Network. It is Rod Pedersen himself. Rod, thank you for joining me today. Couldn't appreciate enough of you for taking the time. Let's kick things into gear. How are you doing? How are you feeling right now, at least in terms of the CFL launching here this week?
Well, very excited. It's week one, as you mentioned, the league announcing the ESPN broadcast contract through all of America, which has everybody's got everybody excited up here. And believe me, with 20 seasons in the CFL that I spent, I know how much love there is for the Canadian Football League in the United States. So I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, you know what? I'm excited to hear about the ESPN deal. I know that they've been, of course, an extensive partner, as they mentioned in that press release. That was the first broadcast they had football-wise, was a CFL broadcast back in 1980. And I'll tell you what, first time in a while I've heard about ESPN News, so I'm gonna have to get a package for that because I got ESPN Plus, is all I can tell you. Really excited. Being honest, it's my first full year I'm going to be watching CFL football as a true fan and at least covering it. But I want to talk about at least the lead up to the season here. Plenty of challenges have been going on. CFL wise, it's I know I'm saying it kind of lightly, but it's amazing we've gotten to this point. How do you look at this as in starting the year? Or is this more of just we're happy to be getting into play, or should we still be at the forefront of going, hey, let's focus on issues like, say, revenue sharing, or in terms of talking about the ticket sales or talking about broadcast deal later down the line? I mean, how do you look at this season just in the fact that it's even existing now?
Well, I guess it depends whose perspective you're looking at it from. If I was a current CFL owner or a current CFL executive, I'd be very happy that the league is playing right now because as a longtime CFL fan, before I was ever in the broadcast booth, I knew that this league has had financial issues and a lot of issues for a very long time, pretty much through its entirety of its 100-year existence. So I didn't think they'd get this far. Honestly, it's a reason to celebrate, to be honest with you, that they are kicking off this week. And I do a variety of shows. You mentioned my main show, my daily sports talk show, but I do a weekly magazine show here. And we had a former safety on, Tyrone Brackenridge, if you remember that name, former NFLer, and he played 6 seasons with the Rough Riders here and coached in Toronto with the Argonauts. And he said he's now in Riverside, California, but he said, I'm so happy for the football guys because it's been very tough mentally on them for the last year and a half. CFL people with no football. So he said that they're in their happy place. So the fans are in their happy place come this week, going to the stadium. The players and coaches are in their happy place. It's like, let's just forget all those other issues that you brought up because maybe we'll never deal with them. Who knows? We're playing, and that's really all that matters, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. And some great signs, by the way, at least just enthusiasm. Your own Rough Riders, by the way, sold out their opening game.
Right.
Sounds like Winnipeg is on the way to doing so. We keep hearing very well with this ticket sales. So sounds like some good, promising signs. I mean, we haven't heard as much about the big markets. That's another issue, of course, in its own right now. For this season, I guess I'll bring that up. Are you, with how the XFL and CFL talks went, and big market, teams kept getting brought up during this discussion, and at least reinvigorating these teams to come out. We've had 20 months now since the league is supposed to kick off. Now it's first season since the end of the 107th Grey Cup. Do you expect that possibly these bigger markets, maybe there's a little more extra enthusiasm because thank God football's back?
That's a really good question. And, with the XFL discussion there, okay, I'm born and raised here. Okay. You mentioned that you're in the heartland in Indianapolis in the Midwest. I'm in the heartland of Canada, the heartland of the CFL, and have never lived a day outside the prairies. So I can't really tell you the mindset of Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal. I just can't, where they're at. I mean, to a lot of the people in those major markets, football will be back when the NFL kicks off in early September. That's just a fact. It never used to be that way, but that's the way that it is now. And, you know, I put this XFL shirt on not to make a statement, only because it matches my earphone cord, so you don't see it dangling down. That's the only reason that I wore it. I wasn't trying to make a statement or anything. The XFL sent this to me actually way back last Christmas, I guess, when these talks first started.
Okay.
And so just today it came, I saw a headline, CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosie won't close the door on talks with the XFL. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's week 1 of the season. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'd like to get a hold of his PR people and just say, can you just give him the guy the cane around the neck? Like, can we talk about this week's game? Why would you bring this up now? Why did you bring it up March 10th that you were talking about a collaboration? And then why would you drop it a month ago? You know, I don't know all the inside information on this. I've got a pretty good idea that a month ago they announced they weren't going to pursue anything, and they're stopping talks because they want to sell tickets for this year. And maybe it's because they've sold out games in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan that they're like, oh, I guess we can talk about it again because the fans are back. I really have no idea. But I just think now is not the best time to reopen the XFL door. Sure.
Yeah, and I just honestly bring it up because I know you yourself have been vocal as more of a terms of, I'm looking for change. I want to see the league, the CFL grow. You know, it's a product that you yourself are passionate about, and many others are, that they don't want it to go, you know, off into the sunset and not be seen again. You know, you want to see pieces that are helping to evolve the sport and get it into a path of, you know, profitability and stability. And that was brought up in a lot of your discussions on your own show, in terms of just, you know, let's look at this as the positive side of things, and let's look at this as a way we can move the league. Now, it is nice to see that the CFL is playing this year, and we're seeing ticket sales, and we're seeing apparently other stadiums reporting high numbers of season ticket holders coming back. So that was really impressive too. You know, having that time away maybe adds on to that little bit of an emphasis as well. In terms of the season, one thing that stuck out, and I know that obviously the whole gambling aspect is now in play. It's legal. It's now legalized, or it's at least starting to be more widespread. Injury reports, something I was not expecting, and I did not realize we're not a part of the CFL until I all of a sudden had that come across my news wire the other day. Why has that not been a normal thing for a football league that, you know, I know it's just north of the NFL, but the NFL uses it to a great effect. So why has the CFL not been using it? And why is this, I mean, besides betting, why has it been this way?
No, betting's the only reason it's changed. Why has it always been this way? Nobody's forced the coaches to divulge injury information. And to be honest, there'll be a lot of CFL fans watching this podcast today. And I was there will be a lot of fans watching this interview right now, and it'll shock them to know that I don't miss really anything of the CFL. Like I love the league. You mentioned me being a fan of the league, and I want to see it grow, but there's a lot of things about it that I don't like. And one of those is trying to cover the league. For instance, salaries and length of contracts are not divulged. That makes it very difficult. And injuries make it really difficult too. And I mean, obviously you're a football fan and media, you mentioned covering it. Mm-hmm. Imagine covering this league for 20 years when there's been many games where I have no idea who the starting quarterback is for my team when the offense runs out onto the field for their first series, because it's been hidden by the head coach. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it's the number 1 guy. A lot of times it's the number 2 guy, and they keep that injury status secret because they've been allowed to. Mm-hmm. And one thing about this market, and I don't assume you've ever been here, but they love the football very similar to where you are all over the United States. I remember a playoff game just a few years ago. I had a buddy texting me the morning of the game saying, who started? And I said, I can't tell you that. And he's like, come on, I'm making bets. I need to know. And I'm like, I can't. I'll be fired if I tell you this information, right? Wow. So does that give you an idea? It's been secretive, and the coaches have been allowed to do it for 100 years. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall in these meetings this summer or off season going, between the business guys and the football guys, it would have been like this, because the football guys wouldn't want to give up that secrecy. I swear to God.
Right. Well, we've been seeing, or at least it seems mostly receptive, although there still are some lingering questions, or some coaches. I know Mike O'Shea was questioned, hey, are you going to divulge your injury report? And he had kind of given a mum answer earlier on in training camp. Finally, this week kind of divulged and said, yes, of course, I'm going to divulge it. So it's not entirely everyone's resisting, but I find that fascinating, especially from the American side of things, where obviously the NFL is the main league and injury reports are just so normal that for me, having to hear that, just seeing a headline going, injury reports are now part of the CFL, just baffled me for a second. I had to step back for one moment, kind of just to take that in a little.
Well, you're telling me, and try covering that league where I think it's obviously a great thing. Transparency. We've never really known why the salary information isn't divulged. I think the only reason is because the salaries are so woefully, embarrassingly low that they don't want that information out. And embarrassing compared to what, by the way? It's no, like the problem with the CFL and a lot of the fan base is they see it as on par with the NFL in a lot of ways. And it's just not. But the biggest reason it's not is because the money isn't into it. I think the average salary is $85,000, $90,000 a year. How could you, in what universe is that comparable to the National Football League? But what's different is the style of the game is tremendously exciting. I'll pick the CFL over the NFL to watch a game. I swear I will, because of the amount of passing, because of the finesse of the athletes in terms of the speed and the D lineman. Like, there's no 400-pound D lineman in the CFL. You need to be able to move and cover sideline to sideline. I think it's pretty exciting. But the money just isn't there. It's not comparable. And they think that the single game betting will change that. I'm not sure that it will.
Okay. I find that fascinating. And that's something I've been kind of stuck with as well. It has been reported 20 million on annual is what is expected right now, early going for gambling amounts that the CFL might see in returns. I'm going to assume that doesn't, of course, instantly give you the funds needed to kind of, get out of the red or help other teams that might be in the red, as we're talking, of course, the big markets in particular. Toronto, of course, being the one in the spotlight with not only trying to get profitability, but also trying to stay in the league for the long term in terms of seeing the CFL as its route. So, plenty at play with that. And I have been really entertained at how all this has divulged over the course of the last few months, seeing people have different ways of looking about this entire situation, and the ways that people have looked at just how maybe there is an out here, maybe there isn't an out here, who knows, let's just all play football is what we're talking at this point. So thank God for that. And speaking of the football, let's go into this week 1. We're finally here. Crazy to think about it. Like I said, it's been 20 months since we last talked CFL actually playing regular season football. We've had QB battles in training camp so far. We've had injury issues reported. Just looking at all how things have gone, in terms of this podcast, we'll have already passed by at least the Thursday game. So looking at the rest of the schedule here, what are you looking for in week 1? Maybe say in terms of just your preferred matchup for the last 3, or just one that you might be wanting to watch out for moving through the season.
Well, it's funny. So the schedule is Friday night. It is the BC Lions at Saskatchewan Roughriders. There's a doubleheader Saturday, Toronto Argonauts at the Calgary Stampeders. And the late game is the Ottawa Red Blacks at the Edmonton Elks. New name. Edmonton is Canada's version of the Washington football team. They changed their name from the Edmonton Eskimos to the Edmonton Elks after a year-long process, and people are really catching on. The game that I'm looking forward to the most, Rough Riders aside, of course, that's the one I'll be watching closely because I've been with the team for 20 years, but I'm really intrigued by the game that's going to go on at McMahon Stadium in Calgary. Rematch of the 1971 Grey Cup. The Calgary Stampeders home to the Toronto Argonauts. And here's the rub. One of my closest friends in the league now is Charleston Hughes. He has led the CFL in sacks each of the last 4 years. He enters this season 27 sacks away from being the CFL's all-time sack king. Okay. Now he played in Calgary up until 3 years ago. He spent last 2 years in Saskatchewan. Now he's in Toronto after a very acrimonious split with the Rough Riders. So I'm going, this is the game I'm the most interested in. Most of my friends, former Rough Rider guys, have gone to the Argonauts. So there's that personal tie-in. But I'm like, this would be like J.J. Watt's first game back in Houston, basically. Okay. If he were to go with, when the Cardinals go to Houston, this is the thing. When we were talking about that on my show today, and a Calgary fan wrote in and he goes, Charleston's been gone too long. It's been 3 years. That's not a thing here. And I'm like, well, good for you. That's what I'm going to be watching. Like, geez. I mean, you've seen that, I guess, Zach, enough of my show to realize we get very interactive with the viewers, yes, right? And I think that's I call it the heroin of sports talk. It just hooks them in, right? And as much as we fight and go back and forth, that's kind of the charm of the CFL, because an Argonauts fan wrote in today and said that he had hand-delivered jerk chicken. You familiar with jerk chicken? Jamaican thing?
Of course.
Yeah. Delivered it to Charleston at Argos practice this week. And I'm like, that is what makes the CFL special, that the fans can literally reach out and touch the players. Not as much as they were used to be able to, COVID, of course. But that's really my marquee game is Toronto at Toronto at Calgary. I'll be watching them all, but you always cheer for your friends, right?
Sure. It's funny with that matchup. Besides the QB competition that's kind of overshadowing Toronto, all the adjustments Toronto made, I kind of see them as maybe a dark horse to maybe make a deeper run for the Grey Cup here, no matter what format might take place. I think personally, I would rather see Arbuckle in that starting position there, but just how they've revamped this roster, I think that they might surprise some people. Otherwise, I mean, if I'm going to pick someone that's more streamlined, it's, for example, Hamilton really, or Winnipeg, both of them returning similar rosters from that 107th Grey Cup, and obviously Mazzoli's healthy for Hamilton. So it's a nice addition to get back. And now that he's announced a starter, it's probably be great to see him back out there in the play. You got a preferred champion you think would be for the 108th?
Well, assuming the CFL gets there, which I have my fingers crossed that it will. You saw they announced the COVID cancellation policy this week. I'm sure you saw that. It's following the NFL model, and I hope the players comply. I give them a lot of credit for they have not been in the bubble basically for a full month yet. Got a long ways to go. But assuming they get to the Grey Cup, and I pray they do, I've got Hamilton winning it. And I think I just got to stay on my Saskatchewan Roughriders representing the West to get there. I've got them picked at 8 wins. Let's not forget they've shortened the season from 18 games to 14 games.
Right.
And it's a war of attrition right now. I mean, I haven't been down to Roughriders practice, but from what I hear from my spies is that they're playing at a lot slower pace than what we would normally be used to. Guys aren't in game shape. You heard about the injuries. I'm not sure there's been a team in the CFL hit harder with injuries than the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the last 1 month of training camp. We have no idea. We'll know after this week what these teams even have. We didn't have a preseason. So, and not to whine, the NFL didn't either last year. But shoot, it's a crapshoot right now sitting here in August.
You worry about the injuries? I know the freak 4 Achilles tears have been kind of a shocker to many. I know the CFLPA also had to put out its own statement just how surprised it was. But are you assuming that this is just going to be a consistent issue through the year, kind of like the NBA with its injury issues?
Well, I think there's a chance. I'm worried because this is not like the NFL or NBA where there's an unlimited supply of players. This is not. You know what I mean? Like you just knew in the NFL, one of our analysts is Torrey Gurley, former Packer and Brown. And he, like last summer at this time, he guaranteed the NFL would play in 2020 because he's like, there is no end of players. And the same thing would be the case for the NBA and NHL. But in the CFL, you're talking about the Canadian government gave the CFL an exemption to lower the quarantine period from 14 days to 7 days. That's still in effect. So anybody else coming into Canada, as far as I know, has to quarantine for 14 days. CFL players didn't have to. So if they go out and get 20 snapped Achilles tendons on Friday night or whatever, 20 broken bones, you got to get American players in because there's not enough Canadian players, and they're going to quarantine, and where are you going to put them and all that. it's very, very tenuous. So we just got to pray that there aren't that amount of injuries. For the most part, so far, so good. But I don't think we're getting the whole story on what the injury situation is, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned transparency. That's still hopefully going to be a better thing as we move forward and move on ahead in future seasons. Again, just obviously gambling affecting some of that for people that, have money on the line. But in the terms of this season, something I had not thought about, but I know obviously the the designation of international players kind of does add an effect. I know that America has plenty of talent available, like you're saying. So obviously you got to rush a few things in. On that fact, though, I know the COVID policy has really been one that, seems like they did right. They picked the NFL's COVID setup as one to go with. And I know that it's supposed to kind of emphasize, hey, let's make sure that A, we can keep our players healthy, but B, if we have to have people ready to go, then, we don't have to use as much time and resources to get people across the border and such as well. From what I understand, watching your show, you're very positive on this COVID policy. Am I right?
Well, I know how much work's gone into it, and I know that they're going to play. So I think they need to be applauded for getting to this point. I mean, I don't know if this is the exact policy as the NFL. I'd be shocked if it is. They've got a 10-player practice roster, which that's pretty normal for every year. But then they've got an additional 5-player roster that's position specific. And it's if there's an outbreak anywhere across the league, those 5 players can be designated to go to another team and they can't refuse to go.
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't see how that could be an NFL thing, because again, you could get players from anywhere in the NFL. They know in Canada how hard it is to get Americans in here. So again, if there's an outbreak with the Hamilton Tiger Cats and we need 11 players, we can pick them from all the other 8 teams' rosters. That's pretty creative. God willing, they won't need to use it, but that's impressive to me.
Right. Here's the hoping about that we don't have to, but yeah, I believe that's a taxi squad, or at least practice squad is what they're labeling it from what I've seen. But you do hope that we don't have to use that for this season as well. Rod, I got to ask you here, in terms of just the CFL in general. I know we've discussed a lot on Randy Ambrosie, just kind of his role here with helping get this designated. And I know he gets a lot of flack at times. I know as of late, it's definitely getting lead into the season. How is he? Do you have a rating for him, or how do you have a defense for him, the guy? I know some people, he's a bane of the existence. Some people, he's the savior of this league at this moment.
Well, I would give him an 8 out of 10. And I think he came on in 2017. He served 3 seasons, 2017, 18, 19. I worked 2 seasons with him, and I've interviewed him multiple times. I've spent a lot of time one-on-one with him. I know him to be a good man whose heart is in the right place. He loves the Canadian Football League. He played in the Canadian Football League. Is anybody perfect? No, I'm not. I don't know. I don't believe you are. I don't think anybody is.
Yeah,
he's got his faults, but they're playing. And the thing was, last week, I just floated out on Twitter, how much credit does Randy Ambrosie get for saving the CFL? And I got my hair blown back from people basically saying, let's wait and see if the league's saved yet. They haven't played a game yet and haven't finished the season. And I think you alluded to this before we went to air about the pay cuts the players have taken and that kind of thing. I realized the hard way that the fans just don't care about the players. They just want to dress up and wear their green, wear their blue, shake their pom-poms, go Riders and go home, go Colts. They don't care about the players. That's the thing. So I guess I get back to the commissioner. Yeah. Would I like to see revenue sharing? If that's what would save the league and make it flush? Yeah, I would. I'd like to see betting have been a component long before it is, like more of a fantasy thing. There's a lot of things I'd like to see. I'd like to see more tickets sold, full stadiums across the league. He's promised a lot of things since he came into the office in 2017, hasn't delivered on a ton of them. But the bottom line is they're playing, and because I would consider him a friend, if not that, a good acquaintance. I think he's done a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. One question I have, because I'm very much on the global aspect of just football in general. I've been covering a lot of European League of Football content, at least overseas. I know that Randy Ambrosie, one of his big points that he had joining the league in 2017, becoming commissioner, was a global initiative. How are you with, in terms of global, at least now with the global draft being in its first incarnation, just the global push? Do you see that as a thing that helps with just the XFL, or sorry, apologies, the CFL growing in the future? And is it something that you think owners should be continuing to invest in?
Well, I've debated this with Randy. Overall, I'd like to see the concept flushed down the toilet.
Okay.
His idea behind this, which he has explained, is how the NBA has become a global league. And it started, he feels, with Yao Ming. And look at all these players from around the globe that are stars in the NBA. I am a hockey guy first. It is Canada, after all.
Mm-hmm.
And, Randy had talked about the European invasion into hockey. And I said, yes, but Sergei Makarov, when he came in 1988 from Russia to the NHL as a rookie, had played 10 years pro hockey in Russia, and he was at par talent-wise. In the CFL, the players that are coming from around the world, the ones that I've seen, can't take the field. They're not good enough.
Okay.
So I admire Randy's initiative. I mean, I know where he's coming from. I was on a,
Sure.
not to sound highfalutin here, but I was on a yacht for a New Year's party off the coast of South Beach in just a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And I was sitting with a couple from Germany, and they said, "What do you do?" I was wearing my Grey Cup ring, and I said, "Oh, I'm a broadcaster in the Canadian Football League." And they said, "The what?" I said, "The Canadian Football League." And he was from Germany. And he said, "Well, I've heard of the National Football League. I think they have a team here in Miami, but the Canadian, why have I never heard of the Canadian Football League?" And I said, "Well, how have you heard of the NFL and not the CFL?" He goes, "Well, the games are on television over here every week. The CFL's not." So what Randy's trying to do is expand that brand around the world for the Canadian Football League. But by bringing in players that can't play, I'm not sure that's the way that you do it. But he's the commissioner. He makes big bucks for that reason. I think if you want to expand the brand of the Canadian Football League, you really do need to bridge this gap with the XFL. I really believe that. I mean, Saturday night, I was watching Disney's Jungle Cruise with The Rock. And I'm just like, I love The Rock. Like, I love him. And he's CFL alumni.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything here adds up. What are we doing? Why did 80% of people in a poll that I polled about this merger with the XFL not want to do it? So that's why I kind of just throw my hands up and I'm like, whatever, live hand to mouth forever. I don't care anymore. I'm not even in the league anymore. But I don't understand why you would want to partner with a league with markets in Houston and St. Louis and Tampa Bay and Seattle, and they're drawing well and tag on. They've got national television deals on all the major networks, but no, let's not, because The Rock's a bad guy. Oh, it infuriates me.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of what was brought out during these talks, I think, and something that I kind of threw my hands up and just kind of stepped back from it, because I was just seeing everyone bicker, and I just was like, if I'm going to yell, I'm not going to get heard, but B, it's just going to make me irrationally frustrated for no reason whatsoever. So I just kind of like, I'm kind of like the audience member. I'm just watching and seeing what happens, up there. And then once the show's over, I can go and give you an opinion.
Yeah, I don't really think that Ambrosie thought when he dropped that bomb, which turned out to be a bomb, that it would become as toxic as it was. And that's why I backed out of it too, because some really offside things were said by people. And I don't just mean fans. I mean media, people in the Football Reporters of Canada Union, of which I'm a member, were saying personal things about Randy Ambrosie and about The Rock. And I'm like, what happens one day if they do merge and you got to be face to face with The Rock at Grey Cup one day? What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just really exposed a lot of people's colors. And I think, but if you use that term toxic, I think that was a very appropriate term for how this went. And I don't think Randy expected that would happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think at the time it was, we're all off season. So, we're not completely at the relaunch. We're not 100%. We weren't even 100% sure back then if we were going to have a 2021 CFL season. We were still waiting. It wasn't even announced until April that, we had talked about June as being kind of like a make or break point for whether we were going to get a full season enacted and everything was going to work out just hunky dory. And sure enough, it did. But I think at that point, to me, the way I looked at it was, all right, some uncertainty. Let's talk future while we have a little time to kill. And, maybe something comes out of it. And I think that it was looked at as one of these things. It's like, just to let you know. And then everyone just stops a second and goes, can you repeat that? Excuse me for a second.
Yeah.
What are you talking? That's not a small thing, my friend. No. So that's how I looked at it back at the time. But again, here we are. For the CFL itself, though, Rod, as we wrap up this conversation, what do you want this season to be for the league? Like, so I know you're not, you just mentioned, I know you're not as involved, but you still cover it quite a bit. I mean, what do you want for the league to have accomplished by the end of the year in terms of maybe just getting back on its feet?
I just want them to get through the season. And I know that sounds very basic, but it reminds me of when we launched the first Rod Pedersen Show 540 episodes ago. And people were like, well, what do you want for viewers? What do you want? I'm like, I just want to get through the show. Fair. And we'll go from there. I just want to see the CFL get through the season. I want to see the least amount of injuries possible. I want to see full stadiums, and they're off to a great start. I just think that they have overestimated the appetite for CFL football in this country. I mean, summer is not, it's never been real easy to sell tickets because we don't have great weather all year. Right. So it's been hard to sell tickets in the summer, but I just think that having a pandemic and wiping out a season for 2020 isn't the best marketing strategy. You've sold out a couple stadiums here because people are happy to have it back. How are you building off this? How are you growing? And I don't see a plan to do that. It's not like they're going to divulge that to me, but let's just get through the season and then reevaluate everything. It goes back to Ambrosi saying today that they haven't closed the door on these XFL talks. I'm like, what? Right. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. That is not a talk to have today. Mm-hmm. So I think we will hear about it next offseason. I really do. Let's just get through this week 1. Okay. And then we'll look to week 2. And then, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You got near term for the CFL is extremely important right now. Like, let's just get this over with. Although I will bonus question, mainly because I've asked this for the last few people I've had on, including Dave Naylor, Justin Dunk. It's more of a fun one because it keeps getting brought up, and I just want to see how everyone thinks. The Atlantic Schooners, where are your thoughts on this? I know it's one of those you kick down the road, but do you want to see it sooner rather than later if we have the chance?
Well, of course, but I think they missed the boat, and the guys that are spearheading that team, one's jumped off the boat already. There were 2 guys, Gary Drummond and Anthony LeBlanc, and they were both owners of the Arizona Coyotes of the NHL. Decent friends of mine, and they were lined up and ready to go. I was in the room at the 2018 Grey Cup when they announced the team name, and they had cheerleaders, and I'm like, what? This is amazing. They packed the convention room in Edmonton at Grey Cup.
Okay.
Really never heard from them again. That was November 2018. They should have played in 2019 in Moncton. I don't know if you're familiar with the region of Atlantic Canada or not, but it's a smaller city, not near the size of Halifax. But let's just get playing. They have a beautiful stadium. I've been there. But no, they're like, no, Rod, you don't understand. It's that pat on the head. No. We're going to wait and do it right in Halifax and build a stadium. Nobody would have known the pandemic was coming, obviously. But now everything I hear out of Halifax is that the new stadium project is dead. COVID killed it. So I just think had they played in Moncton in 2019 on a temporary basis, we'd have had that 10th team. We'd have had balance in the schedule. We'd have had more jobs for players and coaches and broadcasters and everything else. And they missed the boat there. So yeah, I'd like to see it, but they've been talking about it for 35 years.
True. That is also.
So I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, let's hope those fortunes change around, I guess, for the better. Of course, until then, short term, as you mentioned, first week's going on as we are talking right now. I'm looking forward to it, or catching up to it after we're done talking about on this conversation. Rod, thank you very much for joining. Really can't appreciate you enough taking the time. Look forward to watching more of your show and seeing what else you have on takes and at least covering the league itself.
You bet. I really appreciate the time, Zach. I enjoyed it.
The Gridiron Gallery podcast. New episodes every Friday on your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and premiering first, as always, at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, only on unhingedsn.com.